Hello, beautiful souls. Before I share this story with you, I need you to know something. This isn't another Learn English Fast video. This isn't about grammar rules or vocabulary tricks. This is about something much deeper. This is about transformation. This is about a girl who was invisible in her own language, who found her voice in a foreign one. If you've ever sat in a classroom, understanding every word the teacher said, but feeling your throat close when asked to speak. If you've ever typed perfect English messages but stumbled over simple words when speaking. If you've ever felt like English was a wall between you and your dreams, then this story belongs to you too. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I went from being a girl who whispered English words in empty rooms to someone who now speaks 3 languages fluently. But more than that, this is the story of how I discovered that the biggest classroom is not in any school. It's inside your own courage. I didn't have expensive courses. I didn't have native English-speaking friends. I didn't even have internet for most of my journey, but I had something else. I had a hunger that wouldn't die, a method that cost nothing, and a promise I made to myself in the darkness of my teenage years. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Every step, every struggle, every breakthrough, and most importantly, I'm going to prove to you that you don't need anyone's permission to become fluent. You just need to begin. Part 1. The silence that changed everything. I was 14 years old when I realized I was living in 2 different worlds. In one world, inside my head, I was articulate, confident, full of ideas and dreams. In the other world, the real world where people could hear me, I was silent. Especially in English. I grew up in a small industrial town where English was something you studied for exams, not something you lived. My parents worked in a textile factory. My older brother was already working by 16. Education was important, but survival was more important. We spoke our mother tongue at home, in the streets, in our dreams. But I was different. I was the girl who borrowed English novels from the tiny town library and read them under my blanket with a flashlight. I was the girl who secretly watched English movies with no subtitles, understanding maybe 30%, but feeling something magical in the rhythm of the language. I was the girl who wrote diary entries in broken English, imagining I was writing letters to a friend in America. In school, I was the top student in English grammar. I could solve any written test. I understood complex texts. My teachers praised my writing. But when they asked us to practice conversations, I became a statue. My mouth would dry up. My heart would race. The words I knew so well on paper would disappear from my tongue. There was this one moment that changed everything. It was during our final English presentation in 10th grade. We had to speak for 5 minutes about our future dreams. I had prepared for weeks. I knew every sentence by heart. I had practiced in front of my bedroom mirror dozens of times. When my turn came, I walked to the front of the class with my notes. I looked at my classmates, at my teacher who believed in me, at the clock on the wall. I opened my mouth to speak, and nothing came out. Not even a whisper. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only 15 seconds. Finally, I mumbled, I can't do this, and walked back to my seat. The teacher was kind. She said I could try again later. My classmates didn't laugh, but inside me something broke. Not my spirit, my illusion. The illusion that knowing English and speaking English were the same thing. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor and cried. Not just because I was embarrassed, but because I realized I had been lying to myself. I thought I was learning English, but I was only collecting English. Collecting words, grammar rules, sentences, and books. But I wasn't living the language. I wasn't breathing it, feeling it, making it mine. I made a decision that night. A decision that seemed impossible for a girl from my background, with my resources, with my fears. I decided I would teach myself to speak English fluently. Not just speak it, but own it, command it, make it serve my dreams. I had no idea how to do it. I had no teacher to ask, no course to follow, no internet to search for solutions. I only had one thing, the absolute certainty that staying silent was no longer an option. That was the night my real English journey began. Not with a book or a teacher, but with a promise I made to myself in the darkness of my teenage room. I will not be invisible anymore. Part 2. The discovery that everything changed. The morning after my classroom disaster. I woke up with a strange feeling. Not defeat, but determination. I realized that all my English study had been like learning to swim by reading about water. Theoretical, safe, but ultimately useless when thrown into the deep end. I started paying attention to how I had learned my mother tongue. Nobody taught me grammar rules when I was 3 years old. Nobody made me memorize vocabulary lists. I learned by listening, mimicking, making mistakes, and trying again. I learned through play, through stories, through the desperate need to communicate my needs and feelings. But here's what hit me like lightning. I could recreate that natural learning environment for English. I could become my own English-speaking world. That's when I discovered what I now call the invisible conversation method. It sounds simple, maybe even silly, but it became the foundation of my fluency. I decided to live part of my life in English, even when no one was listening. I started small. Instead of thinking, I need to brush my teeth in my mother tongue, I would think I need to brush my teeth in English. While walking to school, instead of thinking in my native language, I would narrate my walk in English. I'm walking to school. It's a sunny day. That dog is cute. I wonder what I'll learn today. But here's the crucial part. I didn't just think these thoughts. I whispered them. I gave them sound, breath, life. Because thinking in English exercises your brain, but speaking in English, even to yourself, exercises your confidence, your pronunciation, your fluency muscles. At first it felt awkward. I would catch myself mid-sentence, realize I was speaking to no one, and feel embarrassed even though I was alone. But I pushed through that discomfort because I understood something important. Embarrassment was just my fear trying to keep me small. Within the first week, something magical happened. I was helping my mother cook dinner, and she asked me to pass the salt. Without thinking, I said, "Here you go," instead of saying it in our language. She looked at me strangely and asked, "Why are you speaking English to me?" I was shocked. I hadn't realized I had switched languages naturally. That was my first breakthrough moment. My brain was starting to think in English automatically, without force or effort. The invisible conversations were rewiring my language patterns, but I knew I needed more than just random thoughts. I needed structure, purpose, challenge. So I created what I called my English Day schedule. Every day I would assign different English-speaking activities to myself. Morning ritual, I would wake up and immediately start my day in English. Not reading English or studying English, but living in English. I would look in the mirror and say, "Good morning, Sarah. How did you sleep? What are you going to accomplish today?" And I would answer myself honestly, spontaneously. Afternoon storytelling. While doing chores or walking somewhere, I would tell myself stories. Not reading stories, but creating them. I would describe imaginary scenarios. If I were a teacher, what would I say to my students? If I met a foreigner on the street, how would I help them? If I had to explain my culture to someone from another country, what would I say? Evening reflection. Before bed, I would have a conversation with myself about my day, but entirely in English. Not perfect English, not textbook English, but honest English. Today was difficult because I felt happy when tomorrow I want to. The beautiful thing about this method was that it was completely free, completely private, and completely mine. I wasn't trying to impress anyone or pass any test. I was simply practicing being myself in a different language. But the real transformation happened when I started treating English not as a subject to study, but as a tool to explore my own thoughts and feelings. I would ask myself deep questions in English. What do I really want from life? What scares me most? What makes me proud of myself? And I would answer in English, even if my grammar was wrong. Even if I had to pause and search for words. This wasn't just language practice. This was self-discovery through a foreign language. I was getting to know myself in English, and in doing so, I was making English truly mine. After a month of invisible conversations, something incredible happened. I was at the market with my mother when a tourist approached us asking for directions. Before my mother could respond, before I could think or panic or freeze, I found myself saying, "Go straight, then turn left at the big tree. The bus station is there." The tourist smiled and said, "Thank you so much." My mother looked at me with surprise and pride. But I wasn't surprised. I had been having conversations in English for weeks. This was just the first time someone else was part of the conversation. That night, I realized I had discovered something powerful. You don't need other people to practice speaking. You need other conversations to practice conversation skills. But you can practice speaking, the physical act, the mental flow, the confidence, completely alone. This realization opened up a whole new world of possibilities for my learning. Part 3. Building my English universe, once I realized that I could create an English-speaking environment around myself. I became obsessed with expanding that environment. I wanted to live in English as much as possible, but I needed to be smart about it. I needed variety, challenge, and progression. I started thinking of myself as the architect of my own English immersion program. If I couldn't go to an English-speaking country, I would bring the English-speaking world to me. First, I transformed my physical space. I made labels in English for everything in my room: door, window, bed, mirror, books. But not just nouns. I wrote full sentences. This is where I sleep and dream. I look at myself here every morning. These books are my teachers. Every time I looked at these labels, I would read them aloud. My room became my first English-speaking territory. Then I created what I called English characters. These were imaginary personalities I would become during different parts of my day. In the morning, I was student Sarah, optimistic, curious, asking questions about everything I saw. In the afternoon, I was teacher Sarah, explaining things to myself, describing processes, sharing knowledge. In the evening, I was philosopher Sarah, reflecting, analyzing, wondering about life. Each character had a different speaking style, different vocabulary, different energy. This wasn't just practice, it was performance. And performance, I discovered, is one of the fastest ways to build confidence. But the real breakthrough came when I started creating challenges for myself. I realized that comfort zones don't build fluency. Challenges do. Challenge 1: the daily news report. Every evening, I would stand in front of my mirror and pretend to be a news reporter, summarizing my day as if it were news. Good evening, I'm Sarah Johnson, reporting from my hometown. Today, a local student discovered an interesting book in the library. The book was about marine biology, and the student spent 2 hours reading about dolphins. The student reports feeling inspired and curious. Back to you, studio. This helped me practice formal speaking, clear pronunciation, and summarizing skills. Challenge 2: the emotion translator. Whenever I felt a strong emotion, anger, joy, frustration, excitement, I would immediately describe it in English. Not just I am happy, but I feel this warm sensation in my chest, like sunshine spreading through my body. My lips want to smile, and I feel like I could run or dance or laugh out loud. This taught me to express nuanced feelings and developed my descriptive vocabulary. Challenge 3: the future self conversation. Once a week, I would have an imaginary conversation with my future self, the fluent English speaker I wanted to become. I would ask her questions. How did you overcome your fear? What advice do you have for me? What mistakes should I avoid? And then I would answer as my future self, giving myself encouragement and guidance. This built both speaking skills and motivation. Challenge 4: the cultural bridge. I would explain aspects of my culture to imaginary English-speaking friends. How do we celebrate festivals? What foods are special to us? What values do our families hold? This prepared me for real cultural exchange and helped me find my unique voice in English. But perhaps the most important discovery was learning to embrace mistakes as teachers, not enemies. I started keeping what I called an error celebration journal. Instead of being ashamed when I made mistakes in my invisible conversations, I would write them down and celebrate them. Today I said, I am very enjoy, instead of I really enjoy. This mistake taught me about the difference between adjectives and adverbs. Thank you, mistake! This shift in mindset was revolutionary. Mistakes stopped being reasons to quit and became reasons to improve. Every error was feedback, Every confusion was a learning opportunity. After 3 months of building my English universe, something amazing happened. I was confident enough to start having invisible conversations in public. I would walk down the street narrating what I saw in whispered English. I would sit in the park and describe the scene around me. I would ride the bus and create stories about the other passengers. Nobody knew what I was doing. To them, I was just a quiet girl. But inside, I was building fluency word by word, sentence by sentence, conversation by conversation. The most powerful moment came when I realized I was dreaming in English. Not every night, but sometimes. I would wake up remembering English conversations from my dreams, and I knew that the language had moved from my conscious practice into my subconscious processing. I was no longer just learning English. English was becoming part of who I was, but I also knew that speaking to myself, no matter how sophisticated, could only take me so far. I needed real human interaction, and that terrified me. Part 4. The Terror and Triumph of Real Conversations. After 6 months of invisible conversations, I had built confidence in my ability to think and express myself in English. But there was still a huge gap between speaking to myself and speaking to another human being. When you speak to yourself, you can pause, restart, change direction. You can't embarrass yourself or disappoint anyone. Real conversations don't offer that luxury. I knew I needed to cross this bridge, but I was terrified. What if all my practice had been useless? What if I froze again? What if people couldn't understand me? Or worse, what if they could understand me, but I couldn't understand them? I decided to start with the safest possible option, strangers who couldn't judge me long term. But even that felt overwhelming. So I created what I called the gradual exposure plan. Level 1. One-sentence interactions. I would go to shops and instead of just paying silently, I would add one English sentence. To the bread seller. This bread smells wonderful. To the bus conductor. Thank you very much. These weren't conversations, just English sentences spoken to real people in real situations. The first time I did this, my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. But the bread seller smiled and said, "Thank you," back in English. That tiny interaction gave me a week's worth of confidence. Level 2. Question asking. I started asking simple questions in English to people who might know some English. Excuse me, what time is it? Do you know where the library is? Is this bus going to the center? Most people responded kindly, even if their English was limited like mine. Level 3. Extended interactions. This was the scary one. I would try to have conversations that lasted more than just one exchange. I started with shopkeepers who seemed friendly, asking about their products, their day, their recommendations. I remember my first extended English conversation with a stranger. There was a small bookshop owner who had some English books. I gathered all my courage and walked in. "Good morning," I said, my voice slightly shaky. "Good morning," he replied. "Can I help you?" "I am looking for English books. Easy books for learning." You are learning English. That's wonderful. How long have you been studying?" This was it. A real conversation about my English learning. I could lie and give a simple answer, or I could tell the truth and practice expressing something personal. I am teaching myself, I said. No teacher, no class, just practicing every day. His eyes lit up. Really? That's impressive. What methods do you use? For the next 20 minutes, I explained my invisible conversation method, my daily challenges, my progress and struggles. He listened with genuine interest, asked questions, shared his own language learning experiences. It was the first time I had had a deep conversation in English with a stranger. When I left his shop with 2 new books, I felt like I had climbed a mountain. Not because the conversation was perfect, I made plenty of mistakes, but because it was real, meaningful, and successful. But the real breakthrough came when I started seeking out more challenging conversation partners. There was a small community center in a nearby larger town that hosted informal language exchange meetings. People learning different languages would gather to practice with each other. The first time I went, I was so nervous I almost turned around at the door. But I forced myself to enter, to introduce myself, to join a conversation group. "Hi, everyone," I said to a small group. "I'm Sarah. I'm learning English by myself, and this is my first time speaking with a group." Instead of judgment, I found encouragement. Everyone in that room was learning something. Everyone understood the fear, the excitement, the challenge of speaking a foreign language. I started attending every week. The conversations pushed me in ways my invisible practice never could. I had to listen to different accents, follow rapid exchanges, express complex ideas under pressure, handle interruptions and corrections. More importantly, I discovered that real conversations taught me things no textbook ever could. I learned about cultural nuances, informal expressions, the music of natural speech. I learned that communication isn't just about perfect grammar, it's about connection, understanding, sharing. One evening, after a particularly engaging discussion about dreams and aspirations, an older gentleman approached me. "Sarah," he said, "I've been watching your progress over these months. When you first came, you could barely finish a sentence without stopping. Today, you led a discussion about education systems for 30 minutes. You should be very proud." I hadn't noticed my own growth because it happened gradually, conversation by conversation, but he was right. I had transformed from someone who whispered English words in empty rooms to someone who could hold court in a room full of people. That night, I made a realization that changed everything about how I saw my journey. I had been thinking that fluency was the destination, but I realized that fluency was actually a byproduct. The real destination was confidence. The real destination was the ability to express my authentic self in any language. I was no longer learning English. I was becoming myself in English. But even with this progress, I knew there was one more challenge I needed to face. I needed to use English not just for practice or learning, but for real purpose, real achievement, real life. Part 5. English as a Life Tool. A year and a half after my journey began, I faced a moment that would test everything I had learned. My school announced a scholarship opportunity for students to attend a summer program at a university in the capital city. The program was conducted entirely in English, and applicants needed to pass an English interview. My teachers encouraged me to apply, but I was scared. This wasn't just conversation practice. This was my future. If I succeeded, doors would open that I never imagined possible for a girl from my small town. If I failed, I would confirm my deepest fear, that all my self-teaching was just an elaborate form of self-deception, but I had changed too much to let fear make my decisions. I applied. The interview was scheduled for a Saturday morning in the state capital, 2 hours away by bus. I traveled alone, carrying a small bag with my certificates and a notebook filled with notes I had written to myself in English. When I arrived at the university, I saw other candidates, students from private schools, coaching institutes, wealthy families. They looked confident, polished, prepared. I felt like an imposter. But then I remembered something crucial. I hadn't learned English to compete with these students. I had learned English to express myself. In that interview room, I wouldn't try to impress anyone with big words or perfect grammar. I would simply be myself, honestly and authentically in English. When my name was called, I walked into a room with 3 professors. They smiled warmly and invited me to sit. "Please tell us about yourself." "Sarah," one of them said. Instead of reciting a rehearsed introduction, I spoke from my heart. "My name is Sarah, and I'm from a small industrial town. I learned English by teaching myself because I believe that language is the bridge between who you are and who you can become. I didn't have expensive courses or native speakers to practice with, but I had something else, the determination to find my voice." They leaned forward, interested. For the next 30 minutes, we didn't just discuss my academic achievements. We talked about my learning methods, my challenges, my dreams. They asked me to explain complex ideas, to give my opinions on social issues, to describe how I would contribute to their program. I spoke about the invisible conversation method, about how I had created an English universe in my small town, about my belief that everyone can become fluent if they're willing to be consistent and courageous. I spoke about wanting to use English not just as a personal achievement, but as a tool to connect with the world and bring opportunities back to my community. When the interview ended, one professor said, "Sarah, your English is impressive, but your story is even more impressive. You've demonstrated that the best teachers are often ourselves." 2 weeks later, I received the acceptance letter. I had not only been selected for the summer program, but I had been awarded a full scholarship based on what they called exceptional self-directed learning and remarkable communication skills. That summer program changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. I studied alongside students from different countries, participated in international debates, presented research in English, made friends from around the world. But more than the academic experience, I realized something profound. English had become my tool for accessing opportunities, not just a subject I was learning. When I returned to my hometown, I was different. Not because I had become fluent. I had been functionally fluent for months. I was different because I had discovered my purpose for English. I wanted to teach others what I had learned. I started volunteering at my old school, helping students who struggled with English speaking. I shared my invisible conversation method, taught them to build their own English universes, helped them overcome the fear that I knew so well. One day, a girl approached me after a session. She was crying. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I've been trying to speak English for 3 years," she said. "I understand everything, but I can't speak. I feel so stupid." I looked at her and saw myself at 14, frozen in front of the class, convinced I was a failure. "You're not stupid," I said. "You're just practicing silence instead of practicing speaking. Let me teach you how to practice courage instead." That moment, I realized that my English journey had never been just about me. It had been preparing me to help others find their voices too. I started making videos, sharing my story, teaching the methods that had transformed me from a silent student to a confident speaker. I created online communities for self-learners, developed free resources, connected with other language learners around the world. English had become more than my personal victory. It had become my way of serving others, my bridge to a larger purpose. But the most beautiful moment came 2 years later, when my former English teacher from school approached me after seeing one of my videos. "Sarah," she said, "do you remember that presentation day when you couldn't speak?" "Of course," I replied. "I want you to know something." That day, I didn't see a failure. I saw a student with so much to say that the fear of not saying it perfectly had paralyzed her. "I always knew you would find your voice. I just didn't know you would help so many others find theirs too." In that moment, I understood that every part of my journey had been necessary. The fear, the failures, the invisible conversations, the gradual building of confidence, the real-world testing, the purposeful application. All of it had shaped me into someone who could not only speak English, but use English to make a difference. Part 6. The method that changes lives now. Let me share with you the complete system that transformed me from a silent student to a confident English speaker. This isn't just theory. This is the exact method I used, refined through my own experience and the experiences of hundreds of students I've since helped. The Invisible Conversation Method. Complete Guide Phase. 1. Internal Foundation, Weeks 1 to 4. Start every day with what I call English Awakening. The moment you wake up, before you check your phone or speak to anyone, spend 5 minutes thinking and speaking in English. Describe how you slept, what you plan to do, how you feel. Don't worry about grammar or vocabulary, just express yourself. Create narration habits throughout your day. While brushing teeth, I'm brushing my teeth. The toothpaste tastes minty. My teeth feel clean. While cooking, I'm cutting onions. They make my eyes water. The smell is strong but good. While walking, I'm walking to work. The weather is nice. I see children playing. End each day with English reflection. Before sleeping, have a conversation with yourself about your day. What happened? How did you feel? What did you learn? What do you want to improve tomorrow? This builds both speaking fluency and self-awareness. Phase 2. Character Development. Weeks 5 to 8. Develop different English-speaking personas. Monday through Wednesday, be curious Sarah. Ask questions about everything you see. Wonder about how things work. Express fascination and interest. Thursday through Friday, be wise, Sarah. Give advice to yourself. Explain concepts. Share opinions. Weekend, be creative, Sarah. Tell stories. Describe dreams. Imagine scenarios. Each persona uses different vocabulary, different speaking styles, different energy levels. This prevents monotony and builds versatility in your speaking. Phase 3. Challenge integration. Weeks 9-12. Introduce structured challenges that push your boundaries. Daily news reporter. Spend 10 minutes each evening summarizing your day as if you're a news reporter. Use formal language, clear structure, confident delivery. Emotion. Translator. Whenever you feel strong emotions, immediately describe them in English. Don't just say I'm angry. Explain why, how it feels physically, what caused it, what you want to do about it. Teacher mode. Choose something you know well and explain it to an imaginary student in English. How to cook your favorite dish. How to solve a math problem. How to care for a pet. Teaching forces you to organize thoughts clearly and use explanatory language. Cultural ambassador. Regularly explain aspects of your culture to imaginary foreign friends. This prepares you for real cultural exchange and helps you find your unique voice. Phase 4. Real-world transition. Weeks 13-16. Start with micro-interactions. Add one English sentence to routine activities. Thank cashiers in English. Compliment shopkeepers. Ask simple questions. Build comfort with your voice being heard by others. Seek structured practice opportunities. Join language exchange groups. Attend conversation clubs. Participate in online speaking forums. Start with low-stakes environments where everyone is learning. Record and review yourself regularly. Use your phone to record 5-minute speaking sessions. Listen back not to criticize, but to notice improvements and areas for growth. The psychology behind the method. This method works because it addresses the real barriers to speaking fluency. Fear of judgment. When you practice alone, you can't embarrass yourself. You build confidence in a safe space. Lack of thinking time. Regular practice makes English thinking automatic, so you don't need to translate in conversations. Limited vocabulary activation. By using the same words repeatedly in different contexts, you move vocabulary from passive recognition to active use. Confidence building. Every day of practice is a small victory that builds cumulative confidence. Natural learning recreation. This mimics how children learn, through constant exposure, repetition, and gradual complexity increase. Common mistakes to avoid. Don't wait until you feel ready. You'll never feel completely ready. Start messy, start imperfect, but start. Don't focus only on grammar. Communication is about connection, not perfection. Perfect grammar with no confidence is useless. Don't skip the emotional component. Speak about things that matter to you, not just textbook topics. Emotion makes language memorable and meaningful. Don't practice only formal English. Include casual conversation, slang, expressions. Real life isn't a classroom. Don't isolate practice from purpose. Connect your English learning to your goals, dreams, interests. Purpose drives persistence. Adapting the method to your situation. If you're extremely shy, start with whispering, then gradually increase volume. Practice in your car, in the shower, anywhere you feel completely private. If you have limited time, use micro sessions. 2 minutes of English conversation with yourself is better than 0 minutes. If you live with others, explain what you're doing. Most people will be supportive and may even want to join you. If you feel silly, remember that feeling silly is just fear in disguise. Every fluent speaker has felt silly while learning. Push through the discomfort. Measuring your progress. Don't measure progress only by fluency. Measure by courage. Are you willing to speak when opportunities arise? Measure by consistency. Are you practicing regularly? Measure by authenticity. Can you express your real thoughts and feelings? Fluency is the natural result of consistent, courageous, authentic practice. Focus on the process, and the results will follow. The advanced stages, once you've mastered basic conversation with yourself, expand into debate practice. Take both sides of an argument with yourself. This builds persuasion skills and complex thinking in English. Presentation practice. Give yourself formal presentations on topics you care about. This builds public speaking confidence. Improvisation. Give yourself random topics and speak for 2 to 3 minutes without preparation. This builds spontaneity and quick thinking. Traditional methods often focus on input, reading, listening, and expect output, speaking, to naturally follow. But speaking is a separate skill that requires separate practice. This method gives you thousands of hours of speaking practice in a safe, supportive environment, yourself. It's sustainable because it's free, private, and flexible. It's effective because it addresses the psychological barriers that prevent most people from becoming fluent speakers. Most importantly, it builds the mindset of a confident speaker, someone who values communication over perfection, courage over comfort, and authenticity over approval. As I reach the end of my story, I want to speak directly to you, the person listening right now. Maybe you're sitting in your room, dreaming of speaking English fluently. Maybe you're walking to work, wondering if you'll ever overcome your fear. Maybe you're a student feeling frustrated by years of study with little speaking progress. I want you to know this. Your English journey doesn't begin when you feel ready. It doesn't begin when you find the perfect course or teacher. It doesn't begin when your fear disappears. Your journey begins the moment you decide that your voice matters more than your fear. I was just a girl from a small town with big dreams and no resources except my own determination. If I could transform from someone who couldn't say her name in class to someone who now teaches thousands of people around the world, then you can achieve your English dreams too. But here's what I've learned. Fluency isn't the destination. Fluency is just the vehicle that takes you to your real destination, the ability to express your authentic self, to connect with the world, to pursue opportunities that once seemed impossible, to help others who are where you are now. The invisible conversation method isn't just about learning English. It's about learning to value your own voice, to practice courage daily, to become the person who speaks up instead of staying silent. Your English journey is really a journey to yourself. Every sentence you speak alone is preparing you for the moment when you'll speak with confidence in front of others. Every mistake you make in private is teaching you resilience. Every day you practice is building the foundation for your future success. I don't know where you are in your journey. Maybe you're just beginning, feeling overwhelmed by how far you have to go. Maybe you've been studying for years but still feel stuck. Maybe you can read and write well, but speaking terrifies you. Wherever you are, remember this. Progress isn't always visible while it's happening. I practiced for months before anyone noticed my improvement. But every invisible conversation was building my confidence, expanding my ability, preparing me for the opportunities that would change my life. Start today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when you have more time. Today. Stand in front of your mirror and say, "Hello, my name is your name. I am learning English, and I am brave enough to begin." That's it. That's your first step. If you found value in this story, if you saw yourself in my journey, then please share it with someone else who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the Fluent Storybook, because every week I share new stories, new methods, new inspiration for language learners who are brave enough to teach themselves. Remember, you don't need permission to become fluent. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need expensive resources. You just need to begin, to be consistent, and to believe that your voice matters. The world needs what you have to say. English is just the tool that will help you say it louder, clearer, and to more people. Your invisible conversations start now. Your visible confidence starts soon. Your fluent future starts today. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write your own.